to give up a billion-dollar empire for the warmth of a hand. Would you dare? This is the story of Evelyn Reed, an ice queen at the pinnacle of power. A woman who had everything except happiness. Her world was a gilded cage until one fateful rainy night, when a cruel truth shattered it all, sending her plummeting from the highest peak to the deepest abyss in a heartbeat. A woman of immense talent and success who built an empire beyond imagination. But fate never grants anyone everything. Beneath the facade of immense wealth lay a soul shrouded in solitude, a dark and desolate inner world. A tragedy for a woman so brilliant, forced to flee a life of lies and a husband consumed by greed and conspiracy. And just as she hit rock bottom, a stranger appeared in the storm. Who is he? A savior in the shadows, or the beginning of a tragedy far worse than the one she escaped? Join us now as we follow the incredible journey of Evelyn Reed. The October rain descended upon the city like a dreary gray curtain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the 50th floor. Inside, the air was no less cold than it was outside. This was the kingdom of Evelyn Reed, a magnificent glass cage suspended above it all where the air was filtered to near sterility, and silence was a commodity as prized as the real estate sprawling below. She was a woman who seemingly possessed everything of material value that millions dreamed of, yet her inner world was a landscape of sorrow, a stark contrast to the opulent luxury she owned. The light rain outside continued to fall, intensifying the sadness, the emptiness, and the lingering loneliness that stretched endlessly within her heart. Evelyn sat at the head of a polished black marble conference table, her back perfectly straight. Her charcoal gray power suit seemed as if tailored from shadow and decisiveness itself. Her jet black hair was pulled back into a flawless bun at the nape of her neck, not a single stray daring to escape its orbit. She was the personification of control. If there are no further questions regarding the Q4 growth forecast, her voice rang out clear and sharp as the sound of honed steel, we will conclude this meeting. No one spoke. The eyes of the 12 senior executives, sharks in Armani suits, were all fixed on the glowing chart on the massive screen. Green numbers danced a symphony of profit, an irrefutable testament to the young CEO's talent. Reed Innovations was at its zenith, and Evelyn Reed was the one who had brought it there. But Evelyn felt none of the euphoria of victory. She felt only a smoldering exhaustion, the weariness of an actor who had played the same role for too long. She glanced at the man seated to her right, Marcus Thorne, her fiancé, her chief financial officer. Marcus smiled a smile perfectly engineered for the covers of Forbes magazine. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, which rested primly on the tabletop. It was a familiar gesture, a silent reminder that she was a part of him, that her success was also his trophy. "Another outstanding quarter, Evie," he said, his deep, warm voice resonating through the room. "Your vision, as always, is extraordinary." Evelyn felt the cold from Marcus's signet ring seep into her skin. She gave a slight professional nod, concealing the clenching in her chest. Her vision. Or was it her father's vision packaged and programmed into her since she was a child? It was a dialogue between two people living a facade, both keenly aware of what they were doing, of their stiff and perfunctory gestures toward one another. It was like a thin veil, concealing the truth and the colossal contradictory feelings within them. The meeting adjourned. The congratulations, the formal handshakes, the artificial smiles washed over Evelyn like a film in slow motion. She responded to it all with the cool grace that had become her trademark. The Ice Queen. That's what they called her behind her back, she knew. They didn't know this queen was imprisoned within her own ice castle. When only the two of them remained in the room, Marcus pulled her closer. The scent of his expensive cologne, a complex fragrance of sandalwood and bergamot, enveloped her. It once made her feel safe. Now it suffocated her. "You were brilliant," he whispered, his lips brushing her ear. "We have to celebrate tonight, le cirque." "I'm a bit tired, Marcus," she said gently, removing his hand. "Perhaps we should just go home." A flicker of disappointment crossed his cold blue eyes so fast that if she weren't so accustomed to him, she would have missed it. But then it was gone, replaced by an understanding smile. "Of course, my love. Anything you want." Anything you want. The words rang hollow. The ride down to the parking garage in the private elevator was silent. The elevator's mirror reflected their image, a perfect power couple, the archetype for any business magazine. But Evelyn saw only a stranger with weary, ash-gray eyes. As she settled into the black Bentley, she leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. Raindrops began to trace paths down the pane, blurring the city's neon lights. Each light was a building, a company, an empire, and she was at the top of it all. So why did she feel like she was sinking? Their penthouse occupied the entire top 2 floors of a skyscraper. It was designed by a famous architect with minimalist interiors, glass walls, and millions of dollars in contemporary art. It was more of a gallery than a home. There wasn't a single personal photograph, not a single piece of clutter to suggest life. It was as perfect and as cold as its owner. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind them with a dry thud, Evelyn felt the atmosphere shift. Marcus's smile vanished. He loosened his tie not with weariness, but with the decisive gesture of a man about to enter battle. Evelyn slipped off her high heels, feeling the soft wool carpet beneath her feet. She walked toward the bar, intending to pour herself a glass of water. "I think I'll take a shower," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "Wait a moment," Marcus said. His voice was no longer warm. It was flat and cold. Evelyn stopped turning around. Marcus wasn't heading for the liquor cabinet. He placed his leather briefcase on the marble coffee table. The sound of leather hitting stone echoed in the silence, a menacing sound. He opened the briefcase and took out a thick, carefully bound portfolio, the weapon clad in black calfskin. "We need to talk, Evie," he said, setting the portfolio down on the table with a heavy thud. "About our future." The way he said the word future sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. It wasn't a future of romantic dinners or vacations in St. Bart's. It was a future to be decided on paper with seals and signatures. Her heart began to beat faster. The rain outside seemed to roar with greater intensity. She looked at the portfolio, then at the eyes of the man she had agreed to marry. And for the first time she saw no love or admiration. She saw only possession. Evelyn crossed her arms over her chest, an instinctive defensive posture. "Our future, Marcus. I'm truly exhausted. Can't whatever this is wait until morning?" "No," he replied curtly, flipping open the portfolio's leather cover. "It can't wait." Inside were pages of ivory paper dense with the legal clauses and stipulations she could recite in her sleep. Merger clauses, transfer of voting rights, trust addendums. This was not a plan for a marriage. This was a corporate takeover. "What is this?" she asked, though a knot was already tightening in her gut, for she knew the answer all too well. "It's an assurance," Marcus said, pushing the portfolio toward her. His voice now held a chillingly rational tone, the one he used to persuade investors. "Evie, you're a genius, no one denies that. But you're too emotional. Your father knew it. He and I drafted this together. A safety net to protect his legacy. Our legacy." Her father. The name was a knife to Evelyn's heart. Even in death, he was still pulling the strings of her life. She had spent her youth proving herself worthy, shouldering the Reed name, only to realize in the end that she was just a pawn in his game. Protect or control? she asked, her voice beginning to tremble with rage. "You and my father went behind my back. We did what was necessary." Marcus's voice rose, his patience wearing thin. "Reed Innovations needs a steady hand, not a heart that can waver at any moment. You run it, but I and the board will make the final decisions. Sign it, Evelyn." "No." The word escaped her lips firm and clear. A single word she hadn't dared to say for so many years. "No." Surprise flashed across Marcus's face, quickly morphing into fury. His polished mask fell away, revealing a face twisted by a wounded ego. "Don't be a fool, Evelyn," he hissed. "Who do you think you are without me? You're just a little girl playing CEO. It was I who paved the way for you, who shielded you from your own mistakes. I will not sign." She turned to leave, but Marcus was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his fingers tightening like an iron manacle. The pain was sharp, but more shocking was the raw violation. In an instant, her fear vanished, replaced by a cold, lucid rage. Everything went quiet. The sound of the rain. The sound of Marcus's yelling. It all faded. Only the pressure of his fingers on her skin was real, and in that moment her survival instinct took over. In one fluid motion, she used her free hand to snatch her laptop from a nearby desk. It wasn't just a machine. It was her fortress, the repository of every email, every document, every piece of evidence of Marcus's shady dealings that she had overlooked, things she had deluded herself into calling sharp business. Before Marcus could react, she yanked her arm free and bolted for the main door. "Evelyn!" His shout echoed behind her, full of indignation and disbelief. But she didn't stop. She threw the door open, sprinted into the private corridor, and jabbed the elevator button with a trembling hand. She ran barefoot, her expensive silk dress now feeling like a cumbersome rag. The elevator's chime sounded like salvation. She threw herself inside, frantically pressing the closed door button. Through the closing gap, she saw Marcus burst out, his face a mixture of fury and panic. The steel doors slid shut, cutting off his image. Evelyn sagged against the elevator wall, panting, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was free, but the freedom lasted only a moment. As soon as the elevator doors opened in the main lobby, she burst out, running past a stunned security guard. She shoved through the revolving glass doors and out into the rain. The cold was a brutal shock. The rain was a downpour, washing away the false warmth of the penthouse. The asphalt was cold and rough beneath her feet. The sounds of car horns, of shouting, the smell of dampness and city refuse assaulted her senses. This was another world, a real world. She didn't know where she was running, only that she had to get away. She turned into an alley, then another, trying to lose any car Marcus might use to follow her. Her drenched dress clung to her. Her hair was now undone, and rain streamed down her face, mixing with hot tears. She heard the squeal of tires behind her. She didn't dare look back. She ran, her heart about to burst, her lungs burning. She clutched the laptop to her chest. It was the only thing she had left, her only shield. Then it happened. As she took a sharp turn at a dark corner, her foot landed on a greasy, slick puddle. Her ankle folded unnaturally. A gut-wrenching pain, sharp as a knife, shot from her foot all the way to her brain. She crumpled to the ground, hitting the cold, wet concrete hard. Her cry of pain was swallowed by the rain and the sounds of the city. She tried to push herself up, but the pain made her vision go white. Her ankle was already swelling, throbbing with an unbearable agony. She was helpless, broken, curled up on the filthy ground. Just then, a pair of bright headlights swept across the end of the alley, casting her shadow against the stained brick wall. A luxury car was slowly advancing. Marcus. He had found her. The car stopped. The door opened, and Marcus's tall figure emerged like a predator closing in on its wounded prey. "The game is over, Evelyn." His voice came cold and cruel. She closed her eyes, despair washing over her. This was the end. But then another pair of headlights, older and yellower, shone into the alley from a different angle at a cross street. A battered old pickup truck sputtered to a halt. Its engine died. For a moment, there was only the sound of the falling rain. The driver's side door opened. Another man stepped out. He was tall, solid, wearing a worn-out work coat. He didn't move quickly, showed no sign of hurry, only a heavy stillness. As the man stepped into the glow of the headlights, Evelyn saw he was carrying a little girl dozing on his shoulder, bundled in a yellow raincoat. Marcus turned annoyed by the interruption. "Get lost. This is none of your business." The stranger gently set his daughter down, whispering something to her, and she obediently stood close to the side of the truck. Then he moved forward, his steps slow and steady on the wet pavement. He didn't look at Marcus. His eyes were fixed on Evelyn, on her pained, crumpled form. "Leave her alone." His voice wasn't loud or imposing. It was low, slightly hoarse and weary, but it carried an unshakable weight, the weight of a man who had seen far worse than this. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. Marcus scoffed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The stranger finally looked at Marcus. In the dim streetlights, Evelyn couldn't see his face clearly, but she could feel that gaze, a gaze that held no fear, no anger, just a quiet certainty. A certainty that Marcus, with all his money and power, could not possibly move. Marcus faltered. He glanced at Evelyn, then back at the man standing between them. Perhaps he realized that violence in a dark alley was not the same as a boardroom battle. He muttered a curse, then turned, got back in his car, and sped away, leaving behind a plume of exhaust and silence. The alley fell back into darkness, and the sound of rain. Evelyn lay there trembling, unsure whether to feel relieved or more afraid. The stranger slowly approached her. He knelt, and for the first time she saw his face clearly. A working man's face etched with tired lines around warm amber eyes. He said nothing, just looked at her swollen ankle, then into her tear-filled eyes. I can't walk," she whispered, her voice broken. The man nodded slightly as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I know," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It's all right. I've got you." Evelyn's world shrank to the most primal sensations, the steady drumming of the rain, the solid strength of the stranger's arms carrying her, and the damp smell of his old coat. She, Evelyn Reed, whose frown could make the stock market tremble, was now utterly helpless, carried like a lost child. Humiliation and a strange sense of security warred within her chest. They entered an old apartment building, the dim hallway smelling of damp wood and long-cooked dinners. He carried her up 3 flights of creaking wooden stairs, his steps even without a single word of complaint. She was a queen without a kingdom, a general without an army, left with only the pain in her ankle and the cold laptop she still clutched in her arms. The door to his apartment opened not with a keycard or a fingerprint, but with an old-fashioned metal key. The space inside was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was small, a little cluttered, but it was alive. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of coffee and clean bleach. A small tricycle was parked in a corner. Stacks of books sat on the floor next to a worn armchair. And on the ivory-white refrigerator door, a collection of crayon drawings was held up by a multitude of tape pieces, smiling flowers, lopsided houses, and stick figures holding hands. He gently set her down on the faded sofa, careful not to cause her pain. The couch sank soft and yielding a world away from the angular, expensive furniture she was used to. "Stay put," he said, then disappeared for a moment, returning with a first aid kit. He knelt before her without a trace of awkwardness and carefully removed her remaining high-heeled shoe. His hands were rough, calloused from labor, yet his fingers moved with the precision and gentleness of someone accustomed to mending fragile, broken things. Evelyn watched in silence. She was used to manicured hands to perfectly trimmed nails signing million-dollar checks. These hands told a different story, a story of things that were broken and needed fixing. He disinfected and temporarily splinted her ankle. Every movement was focused with no wasted motion. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't ask who she was. He simply dealt with the problem at hand, a person who was hurt. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He just nodded, then stood. "I'm Samuel Jones. Just call me Sam. And this is my daughter, Lily." Evelyn then noticed the little girl peeking from a bedroom doorway, her wide amber eyes the very same as her father's, watching her with curiosity. She was clutching a faded stuffed rabbit. "Hello." Evelyn tried to smile, but it felt twisted. Lily didn't answer right away. She tilted her head, staring at the still damp tear tracks on Evelyn's cheeks. Then she turned to her father, her voice clear and bell-like, ringing in the quiet room. "Daddy, is she sad because she misses her mommy like me?" The question, so innocent and unintentionally cruel, struck both adults in the room like a physical blow. Sam froze his breath, catching in his throat. Evelyn felt as if someone had just squeezed her heart. Her pain, an abstract pain of betrayal and loss of power, was suddenly given a name by a far more primal and profound sorrow, loneliness. She turned her face away, not wanting anyone to see her break. Sam cleared his throat, a crack in his calm demeanor. She had a hard day, sweetheart. Grown-ups cry sometimes, too." He gently stroked his daughter's head. "Now why don't you go to your room? I'll be right in." Lily nodded and padded back to her room. When they were alone again, Sam brought Evelyn an old but clean blanket and a mug of warm water. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll figure things out in the morning." He asked no more questions, just quietly went into his daughter's room, leaving Evelyn alone with the darkness, the warm blanket, the pain in her ankle, and the echo of a child's question. Evelyn woke in the middle of the night. The room was dark, save for a faint glow from a star-shaped nightlight spilling from Lily's room. Her ankle throbbed, a brutal reminder of her reality. How long had she been asleep? A few hours. Guilt weighed on her chest. Who was she to barge into the lives of these strangers, bringing her trouble and her chaos? She had no right. She had to go. Suppressing a groan of pain, she pushed herself up. The laptop was still beside her, a foreign object from another world. She had to disappear before morning. No, thank you, no explanation. Just vanish like a ghost. She hobbled toward the front door, each step an agony. Her high heels were placed neatly on a doormat, but as she bent to pick them up, she froze. They were no longer soaking wet and caked in mud. Someone had carefully wiped them dry. A small chip on the heel had been repaired with some kind of glue. Beside them was a neatly folded clean towel, and on the towel lay a small piece of paper torn from a notepad. The handwriting was rough, a bit uneven, but steady. "The wound isn't healed. Stay. No, sincerely, no name. Just 5 simple words." Those 5 words, unconditional, without expectation, without demand, completely demolished the defensive walls Evelyn had spent a lifetime building. She slowly sank to the floor, the note trembling in her hand. Her entire life, everything she received had come with a price. Her father's affection came with performance expectations. Marcus's fidelity came with contractual clauses. Her employees' loyalty came with salaries and benefits. But this was something else. This was kindness in its most elemental form, and it terrified her more than Marcus's rage ever could. She sat there for a long time on the cold floor of a stranger's home and wept. Not the heaving sobs of anger, but the silent hot tears that washed away years of accumulated loneliness. The next morning, she was awakened on the sofa by the sharp scent of ginger and the quiet clinking from the kitchen. She sat up, her ankle slightly less swollen. Sam emerged with 2 ceramic mugs in his hands. He was wearing an old t-shirt and work jeans. "Ginger tea," he said, simply placing a mug on the coffee table in front of her. "It'll help with the pain." "You don't have to do this," she mumbled. "I know," he replied, then perched on the edge of the table, a fresh roll of gauze in his hand. Ginger, hot water, a steady hand, sometimes that's all it takes. He gently lifted her leg onto his lap and began to change the dressing. Evelyn held her breath, watching his fingers work. He did it with a quiet focus, not a hint of hesitation. His touch was professional, non-invasive, yet it felt more intimate than any embrace Marcus had ever given her. After he finished, he noticed her suit jacket draped over the arm of the chair, the shoulder seam torn during the struggle. Without a word, he retrieved a small sewing kit from a bookshelf and began to thread a needle. "Don't," she blurted out. It's expensive. Just leave it." "Anything worthwhile should be mended," he interrupted softly, and began to stitch the tear. His stitches were uneven, not perfect like a machine's, but he did it with an extraordinary patience and care. Watching his needle move up and down, something inside Evelyn finally broke. The tears came again, this time uncontrollably. She quickly covered her face with her hands, ashamed of her weakness. Sam stopped. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, her voice choked. "No, it's just, I'm not used to this. To what? Being cared for." He didn't press. He just quietly put the sewing kit down, went to get a box of tissues and handed it to her. "Everyone deserves to be cared for," he said softly. "Even you." Just then, the pitter-patter of small feet sounded on the wooden floor. Lily appeared in the doorway, her curly hair tied in 2 small pigtails. She was wearing dinosaur print pajamas and clutching a piece of drawing paper. Without a moment's hesitation, she walked straight to Evelyn, who was still trying to dry her tears. Lily placed the paper in Evelyn's lap. "This is for you," she said, her voice full of pride. Evelyn slowly unfolded the paper. It was a vibrant crayon drawing, a blue sky, an orange sun, and a purple house. Standing in front of the house were 2 stick figures, a tall man with brown hair and a smaller girl holding his hand. Father and daughter. But next to the little girl there was a 3rd figure. It wasn't colored, in just a faint outline, the ghost of a woman with long hair. That figure was also holding the little girl's other hand. It was like a memory, an unfinished wish. Evelyn looked up, confused. "Who is this Lily?" Lily pointed to the man and the girl. "This is Daddy. This is me." Then she pointed to the faint outline. "And this is Mommy." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Oh, it's a beautiful picture, sweetheart. Daddy says Mommy went to heaven and became a star." Lily continued, her voice growing softer. "So I drew her faded. This spot. I left it empty for a long, long time." She looked up at Evelyn, her clear eyes seeming to see right into her soul. "But last night I thought, maybe this spot isn't meant to be empty forever. Maybe it was being saved for you." The paper in Evelyn's hands began to crumple from her tight grip. Her heart skipped a beat. A 6-year-old child with pure emotional wisdom had just offered her something the entire glamorous world outside never could place. Not the position of CEO, not the role of a fiancé, but an empty space in a family, a void shaped by loss, now offered as a gift of hope. "Why? Why me?" Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking. Lily shrugged, as if the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you're here," she said, "and you look like someone who needs a family." Evelyn stared at the ghostly figure on the paper, her heart missing a beat. She heard a soft intake of breath from the kitchen doorway and looked up. Sam was standing there, a dish towel still in his hand, his gaze fixed on the drawing, then shifting to her. In his amber eyes was a universe of chaotic emotion, a lingering sorrow, a tenderness for his daughter, and something new she couldn't name, perhaps recognition, a silent acceptance. He said nothing, just gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. But it was enough. It said, "I see you, I understand." Evelyn turned back to Lily, struggling to find her voice. She cleared her throat, gently stroking the girl's curly hair. "Thank you, Lily," she whispered. "This is the kindest gift I have ever received." Lily beamed a radiant smile that could light up the entire room. "So, will you color it?" she asked, offering Evelyn the box of crayons. "What color dress do you like?" Evelyn let out a choked laugh mixed with tears. "Purple," she replied. "Let's give her a purple dress." And as Lily diligently applied thick strokes of color, filling the ghostly void with the vibrant purple of life, Evelyn felt something inside her, a knot that had been tight for so long, begin to loosen. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt like she was being colored back in. Several days passed. A gentle rhythm began to form in the small apartment. Evelyn still moved with difficulty, but the pain in her ankle was nothing compared to the transformation happening within her. She hated feeling weak, hated being dependent. But Sam never made her feel like a burden. He would offer his arm without her having to ask for her to lean on as they moved through the house. When she stumbled, he steadied her. When she winced, he paused. There was no pity in his actions, only presence and patience. "Slowly, one step at a time," he would say, his voice low and calm. And Evelyn would nod, focusing on their rhythm. Step, breathe, balance. It became their silent ritual, a dance of trust. One sunny Saturday morning, Lily declared it was time for pancakes. "Daddy's are just okay," she said with a dramatic shrug. "But I bet Miss Naima, she was still getting used to the name Evelyn, can make some really fancy ones." "I wouldn't be so sure," Evelyn cautioned with a weak smile. "The truth is, I've never actually cooked anything myself." Lily's eyes widened. "Never? Not even toast? Not even toast?" Sam, reading the paper at the kitchen table, looked up and raised an eyebrow. "Well, that changes today." They crowded into the small kitchen, elbows bumping, as Evelyn tried to whisk batter in a chipped ceramic bowl. Lily stood on a stool to reach the counter, her curls bouncing with excitement as she issued commands like a master chef. "More milk, not too much egg, and you have to wait for the bubbles before you flip." Evelyn tried to follow, but the first pancake stuck to the pan. The second folded in on itself. The third somehow caught fire. Sam snatched the pan from the stove in a flash, swatting at the wisp of smoke with a dish towel. "I think this one's yours," he joked, flicking the blackened lump onto Evelyn's plate. All three of them burst out laughing. A real, belly-aching, unguarded laugh. The sound filled the kitchen like sunshine. When they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were a disaster, lopsided, slightly burnt, a few even raw in the middle. But Lily grinned as she took a huge bite. "These are the silliest pancakes," she declared. "But silly is yummy." They ate slowly. Golden sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. Outside, the city of Oakland still bustled and rushed, but inside this apartment time seemed to slow down. Lily chattered about school, about how she almost won the spelling bee, how her teacher wore socks with cats on them, and how, "Today I told my whole class that Miss Naima might be my new mom." Evelyn froze for half a second, her fork suspended in midair. Her eyes met Sam's across the table. He showed no sign of fluster or surprise. He simply reached over and poured more syrup on Lily's plate as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That evening, after Lily was fast asleep amidst her coloring books and stuffed animals, Evelyn and Sam sat on the sofa. The TV was off. The silence between them wasn't empty but full. Headlights from passing cars swept across the window, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. Evelyn pulled the blanket closer, her body still aching from a day of learning to walk again. Without much thought, she leaned over and rested her head on Sam's shoulder. He didn't move. She could feel the steady beat of his heart under her cheek, feel the solid warmth of him grounding her to the present. "You don't know it," she whispered, her voice barely a sound, "but you saved me from so many things." Her voice was just a breath, but he heard it. He didn't turn, didn't ask her what she meant. He simply said, "I didn't save anyone. I just saw someone who needed help." Evelyn closed her eyes. That answer, so quiet, so genuine, without a trace of heroic pride, cut through all the noise she had lived with for years. No one had ever looked at her and seen a person first. They saw opportunity, strategy, success, a name. But Sam, he saw a person in pain, and instead of walking away, he had stayed. "I spent my whole life building walls," she continued, her voice still a whisper. "So high I couldn't even climb out myself. I thought they were protecting me, but they were just caging me in." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was deeper. "I know that feeling. Sometimes what looks like a fortress from the outside is really a prison from within." She lifted her head slightly to look at him. "Your past, your work as a paramedic, does it have to do with that?" He looked out the window, his gaze distant. "People call you a hero when you pull someone from a wrecked car, but they're not there when you can't get a mother's heart to start again. They don't see the nightmares that follow." He took a deep breath. "I built my own wall after my wife died. A wall made of handyman jobs and Tuesday laundry nights. Safe. Predictable. No life or death." He turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes, a vulnerability that mirrored her own. "Until that night in the alley," he continued. "When I saw you, I didn't think. I just acted. It was like an old part of me woke up." They sat in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was woven from shared pain, from understood burdens. Evelyn's hand unconsciously found Sam's where it rested on the cushion. His fingers gently closed around hers. In the small apartment filled with crayon drawings, two people who had been broken by their own worlds had finally found a haven. Not just a roof over their heads, but in each other. Peace is as fragile as a pane of glass, and it began to shatter with the ring of a telephone. It was a Wednesday afternoon, sunlight slanting through the window, casting lazy patches of light on the floor. Evelyn was sitting on the floor, helping Lily arrange her collection of crayons in rainbow order. For the first time in years, her mind was completely still. Then, Sam's cheap phone, used only for repair calls, began to buzz insistently on the kitchen counter. Sam answered, and after only a few seconds, his entire body tensed. "No, you have the wrong number," he said, his voice even, but his eyes turning sharp as ice. He hung up, but a minute later it rang again, this time from a different number. "Don't answer it." Evelyn said, her heart beginning to pound. She knew. Somehow, she just knew. After the phone came the doorbell. Not the friendly ring of a neighbor, but a decisive, persistent press. Sam looked through the peephole, then quickly stepped back, his face darkening. "Don't move," he said, softly, his voice taking on the command of someone in an emergency. "Get Lily into the bedroom." Evelyn didn't need to ask. A glance out the window was enough. A sleek black sedan, the kind reserved for the powerful, was parked at the curb. A man in a suit stood leaning against it, phone in hand. They had found her. Within an hour, the quiet little street had been turned into a stage. More luxury cars arrived. A cameraman. a female reporter in a tight-fitting blazer with a microphone bearing the logo of a financial news channel, a lawyer with a tie that screamed the words "damage control." The sidewalk outside the apartment building became a low-grade siege. Sam stood blocking the door, arms crossed over his chest, his solid frame a living wall. From the bedroom, Lily's small voice called out, "Daddy, why are there so many people outside? It's okay, sweetie." Evelyn answered, trying to keep her own voice from trembling. "They're just lost." As night fell and the crowd outside grew tired and thinned, Evelyn received an email. It wasn't from Marcus. It was from the chairman of the board. An offer so generous it was obscene. Millions of dollars in compensation. Full reinstatement as CEO. A rebranding and reputation management campaign. All she had to do was come back, sign the papers, smile for the cameras, and pretend nothing had ever happened. She stared at the laptop screen at the golden cage being offered one last time. Then she closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. Sam was standing there drying a plate with an old checkered towel. "I'm not going back," she said. He didn't look up right away. "Are you sure?" "Positive," she replied, her voice firmer than it had ever been. "They offered me more money than I could spend in a lifetime. But in all those years, not once did I wake up feeling the way I feel here." He turned to look at her, his amber eyes serious. "How do you feel here?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then found the right words. "Real? Seen? Safe." He gave a single nod. That one nod was enough. The next morning, before the sun rose, they packed a single bag. Sam carried a sleepy Lily to the pickup truck and drove them out of the city. The skyscrapers receded behind them, giving way to winding, tree-lined roads that were beginning to turn the gold of autumn. They arrived at a quiet farm tucked behind a grove of birch trees. It belonged to Sam's mother, a retired nurse with soft, salt-and-pepper hair and hands that knew how to make anyone feel like a child again. She took one look at Evelyn, asked no questions, and said, "There's hot bread in the oven and a clean bed upstairs. Make yourself at home, dear." That night, under a sky full of stars and a silence Evelyn had forgotten existed, she and Sam sat on the porch steps, an old wool blanket spread across their laps. "I used to think I had it all," she said, her voice a mere whisper in the night. "The title, the assets, the power." She gave a sad smile. "But it was all hollow. I didn't realize how much I'd given up just to be seen as successful." Sam took a sip of tea, then spoke. "They saw your name, not you." "Exactly." He looked out at the distant fields, his voice deepening. "I know what that's like, to be seen as something you're not." She turned to him. "Tell me." He took a deep breath, the thin white plume of it dissolving into the cold air. "Years ago, there was a car accident, a family. I was the first on the scene. I managed to pull the father and the son out. They were badly hurt, but they lived." Evelyn could hear the tension in his voice. "The mother? I did everything I could, CPR, the defibrillator. Her heart wouldn't start again." He was silent for a long moment. "Her husband just kept looking at me like I was God and I couldn't perform a miracle. The papers called me a hero, but every night I dreamt of that woman's eyes." "You still carry it, don't you?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Every day." He turned to her, and in the darkness she could see the vulnerability and pain he had kept hidden for so long. "It's why I quit. I couldn't stand holding life and death in my hands anymore. Fixing a broken washing machine, it's a lot safer." Evelyn reached out and took his hand. Their fingers intertwined. Nothing more needed to be said. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was shared, respectful. They just sat there, two people who had known loss, two souls bearing invisible scars, and in the quiet of the night they quietly began to heal one another. The boardroom was colder than she remembered. Not because of the temperature, but because of the energy. The sleek glass walls, marble floors, and metallic accents reflected every sterile angle of the space where Evelyn Reed once ruled with a single glance. Now she walked with a limp. Her footsteps echoed in an uneven rhythm, one heel dragging slightly on the floor from her healing ankle. She wore no designer gown, no diamond jewelry. Just a simple, clean navy blue suit and a burning resolve in her eyes. Every head turned. The murmuring began instantly. She's back. She actually showed up. What the hell is she thinking? Marcus Thorne stood at the head of the room, smug, relaxed in the chair that was once hers. He smirked, leaning into the microphone. "Miss Reed, what a surprise. I had assumed you'd finally accepted your place, outside the boardroom." Evelyn didn't flinch. She walked to the center of the room, resting one hand on the table for balance as she faced the crowd of shareholders, executives, and former allies. Her voice was clear, without a trace of a tremor. "I came back to end this the right way." Marcus started to retort, but she held up a hand. A calm, quiet gesture, full of an authority she once wielded like a knife. "I may not walk the same way I used to," she said, glancing down at her ankle. "But I stand taller than ever, because now I stand for myself." The room was utterly silent. With a single touch on her laptop, the massive screen behind her lit up. Spreadsheets, emails, secret memos, it all poured out in a torrent of data. Proof of fraudulent deals, manipulated contracts, and the internal corruption orchestrated by Marcus and a few other board members. Gasps broke the silence. Evelyn slowly turned, looking each person in the room directly in the eye. "You thought I disappeared because I was weak," she said. "But I left because I needed space to remember who I was before all of you convinced me I had to be someone else." Marcus shot to his feet, trying to regain control. "This is reckless. Do you have any idea what this will cost you?" Evelyn truly looked at him, and for the first time she saw how small he was. "I do," she said, "and I'm willing to pay it." She pulled a document from her briefcase and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. "This is my official resignation, effective immediately. I am relinquishing my position, my shares, and every last piece of control you ever thought you had over me." The silence that followed was thunderous. "You can have the boardroom seats, the stock options, the empire built on fear and silence," she added. "But I will no longer be a part of it." One of the shareholders, an older black woman who had mentored Evelyn in her early years, leaned forward. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. "Why?" Evelyn's voice softened but grew even stronger. "Because I am not a product. I am not a brand. I am not a bargaining chip in someone else's game. I am a person." Marcus, still standing, made one last attempt. "You will regret this. You're throwing everything away." Evelyn looked at him one last time. "No," she said. "I am walking away from something that was never truly mine." She gathered her laptop and her briefcase with a quiet grace. As she walked out, step by limping step, no one dared to stop her. Not this time. And when the elevator doors closed behind her, she didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She exhaled. One long, deep breath. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was on fire with amber and rose. Evelyn stepped onto the sidewalk not as a CEO, but as a woman who had finally chosen herself. And for the first time in years, her shoulders didn't carry an empire. They carried only her truth, and that was more than enough.